So when I'm working with a client, I talk to that client about eating the right foods in the right amounts at the right time. Now, I think so many people would get so far along the path to achieving their goals just by beginning to eat the right foods. Now, what are the right foods? To me, first and foremost, are what we would call whole foods. That foods that are as close to what they came from or out of the earth as when they hit your plate. So those foods that provide a lot of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, things your body needs to be firing and working at its best. Examples of those right foods are lean proteins, such as poultry, such as lean cuts of beef. Fish would fall under that category. Legumes, beans. So lean sources of protein, vegetables, and fruits. They pretty much, unless they're turned into a casserole, they're pretty much, you can identify them. There was an apple on a tree, and now I'm having an apple. Asparagus, there's asparagus growing out of the ground. It's asparagus on my plate. That's a whole food, where it hasn't gone through this huge process or a series of different processes in a factory, more than not, and then shipped to the shelves of a grocery store where they can sit for days on end. So right foods are foods, again, that are whole in nature, lean proteins, vegetables, smart carbs. So again, more complex carbohydrates, foods that are more in their whole food form, and then healthy fats as well. So when I start working with the client, it's a matter of let's get you eating these foods more often than not. And then once a client is consistently doing those things, and in terms of consistency, I feel if a client's doing the thing 80% of the time, that's good enough for us to then start maybe tweaking and making adjustments. So if I've got a client that at 80% of their meals, so 8 out of 10 of their meals, I can identify the lean protein, I can identify the vegetable, I can identify the smart carb, I can identify the healthy fat. They're doing that 8 out of 10 times, and they're not seeing the result they want. Okay, now you've got the right foods, let's get the right amounts. And so protein needs don't change. I advocate 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So when I'm looking at someone's plate, and they're doing this, let's say 4 times a day, they're eating a meal, and they weigh 160 pounds. I would expect to see about 40 grams of protein on their plate. What is that? If we're looking at an animal-sourced form of protein, animal-sourced being chicken, fish, beef, I want about a palm-sized serving, okay? But if they need 40 grams, that's about 2 palm-sized servings. That's a lot of food to people, but guess what? Yay, you get to eat a lot of food. That's pretty exciting. So we then start to mess around with the amounts. So if I see that, hey, you're not getting adequate protein, let's make sure you're getting that first, okay? And then also, man, in general, 6 to 8 servings per day for about anyone. If you're a smaller frame, maybe you can do a little bit less. You're a larger frame, you can do a little bit more, but you can't go wrong with 6 to 8 in terms of your vegetables. So are they getting their vegetables? From there, if they're getting their protein, they're getting their veggies, they're not seeing the results. It's in the carbohydrates and the fats that I like to tweak things. And it may be like, hey, I'm plateauing, it's been a few weeks, I'm still training the same amount, I'm still as active because those things are important. I'm doing the same things, I'm eating the same foods because I've accepted that, hey, maybe my meal planning needs to be a little bit more boring or a little more consistent than it's been. Then, okay, let's pull maybe a cupped handful of carbohydrates or a thumb of fats from 1 or 2 meals during the day. And all of a sudden, we're now addressing the right amounts. We tweak those things until they start to see their fat loss again. Or it could be weight gain or muscle gain. Can you believe people actually want to do that? Yes, I've got clients that want to do that. So again, we want to be consistent with our protein. We want to be consistent with our veggies, but then we get to play around with the carbs in terms of getting the right amounts for that person. And then lastly, and when I say lastly, most people don't need to overly concern themselves with the timing of when they're getting those food items. Basically, I would love for a person at each meal to be getting each of the 4 things that I talk about, those lean proteins, the vegetables, the smart carbs, and the healthy fats. Most people, general fitness enthusiasts, would do well to have just a well-balanced diet in that regard. So in terms of timing, can it serve a purpose? Yes. Now, sometimes when people talk about timing, particularly right now, it's often about intermittent fasting, where they've created these windows for themselves in which they can eat. And that very much falls in line with meal timing. And I'm not going to discount certain physiological benefits of intermittent fasting, because first of all, I'd be way over my head in terms of my knowledge of intermittent fasting, but I do know this. A lot of times when people intermittent fast, they don't change the quality of food they're eating, and they only change the amount because they've given themselves a smaller window. And so just because they're eating fewer times, they're eating fewer calories, and all of a sudden they're just going around just proclaiming the value and how wonderful intermittent fasting is. But I don't think it's necessary. So in terms of timing, that may not be so important. Also, people oftentimes think about, when should I have my carbs? When should I have my protein? When should I have my fat? Again, 99% of the population would see their results through to fruition if they didn't even worry about timing.